If the name Napster is brought up around Lars Ulrich, he'll have only one reaction: anger and bitterness. That's because he never knew it would get out of hand that fast.
It started off a street fight, and then like a month later, it was like, whoa!
From a shocking revelation to a full-on court case and public backlash, Lars Ulrich was losing sleep and money over Napster. But after 2 decades, he has finally spoken again on the whole incident. To truly understand the moment Metallica decided to declare war on Napster, you have to remember the landscape of music consumption in 1999. It was the absolute, unchallenged peak of the compact disc era. Albums were locked down, priced around $18 to $20 a pop. We weren't just buying music, we were buying the plastic, the jewel case, and the liner notes. For the entire music industry, the labels, the distributors, the entire corporate machine, this economic status quo was absolutely sacred. They were the kingmakers, and we were the loyal subjects. But while the labels were counting their millions, a quiet digital revolution was brewing in dorm rooms and dark corners of the internet. That revolution was the MP3. It offered fantastic fidelity, unrivaled convenience, and crucially, a cost of zero. This wasn't the slow, fan-driven physical exchange of old-school tape trading. This was instant, global digital sharing, and it was about to detonate the entire system. This glaring market inefficiency was the perfect incubator for Napster. The MP3 provided the ammunition, the small, high-fidelity digital file. But the world lacked a reliable, user-friendly system to exchange those files easily. But how did the chaotic idea of sharing files turn into a unified, corporate slang force? It took one frustrated college kid to figure out the elegant, terrifying solution. Napster wasn't birthed by a corporate boardroom. It was an accidental revolution started by a frustrated college student. Sean Fanning, the founder, created the service in 1999 primarily as a way to solve a simple problem for his friends. Finding the specific MP3 files they wanted was still too difficult. Fanning's true genius was in his hybrid peer-to-peer architecture. He created a centralized server that functioned as a giant index. When you logged in, Napster scanned the songs you designated as shared and reported them to the server. When you searched for Enter Sandman, the server told you which users were online right now and had the file. Your computer then downloaded it directly from that other user's hard drive, from one music-loving peer to the other. This centralized indexing model made finding specific songs effortless and reliable, turning the service into a killer app that grew exponentially. At its peak, Napster boasted over 80 million registered users, exchanging millions of songs daily. It proved that consumers were against the inconvenient, expensive, and inflexible CD model, and they expected music to be free. This is the point where the CD era died. Napster offered the full catalog, complete control, and instantaneous delivery for free. While the music industry felt the distant rumble of financial disaster, for Metallica, the threat became a personal, infuriating reality with the leak of one of their most anticipated tracks. The digital chaos was theoretical until it breached the walls of their studio vault. For Metallica, the moment of violation was shockingly tangible. It was early 2000. Metallica was locked away in the studio, crafting a single for the Mission: Impossible 2 soundtrack. The track was called I Disappear. It was a work in progress, a demo, unmixed, unmastered, and absolutely 100% unreleased. It was a secret, safely locked within the walls of their studio vault, or so they tragically thought. One morning, the phone rang. It was their manager. The song was on the radio. Not just some obscure college station, we're talking major market titans across America, from Boston to LA. The band was baffled. How? The label didn't have it. The movie studio didn't have it. As Lars Ulrich himself has explained, the confusion and the ensuing panic was absolute. This is the single most misunderstood fact of the entire saga. Metallica was not an anti-fan band. They were the opposite. They were the original godfathers of fan bootlegging. They pioneered the taping section at their shows. They actively encouraged fans to record their concerts and trade cassettes and tapes. But this was not that. This wasn't a fan in the 20th row with a microphone. This was, in their eyes, a digital home invasion. Someone had picked the lock on their private vault, stolen an unfinished painting, and was now mass distributing millions of photocopies of it on the street for free. For Lars, this wasn't an abstract corporate debate. It was a vicious personal violation. It was, in his words, a street fight. Drummer Lars Ulrich later summarized the band's defiant attitude. "Well, they screwed with us. We'll screw with them." The core issue was not the sharing. It was the absolute lack of permission. Napster, a company on its way to a multi-billion-dollar valuation, never once picked up the phone. They never asked. They just took. So, Metallica fought back. They filed a landmark lawsuit against Napster for copyright infringement, and then they made their first and most catastrophic public relations mistake. They didn't just sue the company, they targeted the users. Lars, in a move of pure, unfiltered, and tactical confrontation, personally delivered that mountainous 60,000-page list of 335,000 usernames to Napster's office, demanding they be banned. In his mind, he was proving a legal point. These were real individuals engaged in theft. But to the world, it looked like a multi-millionaire rock star personally attacking a college kid in his dorm room for downloading a song. But here's where things got interesting. Metallica weren't the only people who had a problem with Napster. The rock giants were about to be joined by a hip-hop titan, turning a single band's battle into a unified front for every creator. Metallica had drawn the first blood, but in the court of public opinion, they were rapidly becoming the face of corporate rock greed. The rock world was divided, but what gave the legal assault on Napster undeniable cross-genre weight was the arrival of the legendary producer and rapper Dr. Dre. Just weeks after Metallica filed their paperwork, Dr. Dre birthed Andre Young, and his label, Aftermath Entertainment, filed a nearly identical lawsuit in a Los Angeles federal court. This wasn't just another disgruntled artist. This was the West Coast hip-hop powerhouse, a foundational figure in modern music, joining the battle. Dre and Metallica shared more than just a common enemy. They shared the same attorney, Howard King, instantly giving the case the appearance of a unified, bi-coastal defense of creative property. The message was clear. This wasn't just a heavy metal problem. This was a problem for all artists who relied on the value of their recorded work. For a meticulous producer like Dr. Dre, whose craft relied on tight control over his masters, the violation was fundamentally about his livelihood. Dre first issued a direct demand: remove all his copyrighted works from the Napster service. The company's response, that it couldn't physically remove songs, only ban individual users after they were identified as thieves, was deemed comical by his legal team. That refusal confirmed for Dre that Napster was either unwilling or unable to respect artistic control. In a terse but powerful statement released at the time, Dre cut through the noise of the sharing community argument. "I work hard making music. That's how I earn a living. I don't like people stealing my music." His words lacked Lars Ulrich's philosophical detail about control, but they hit just as hard with their raw emphasis on compensation and ownership. He and Metallica were locked in a two-front war against the technology itself, but the lawsuit had a price. The backlash was not just swift, it was total. It was a cultural execution that changed everything, and Metallica was about to learn a brutal lesson about being the first one over the wall. Metallica, the band that built its entire identity on being the anti-establishment underdogs, the furious misfits who wrote Master of Puppets and spat on corporate rock, had overnight become the man. They were instantly cast as the greedy suits they had spent their entire career railing against. The nickname Metallicash stuck like an infected wound. The narrative was simple, deadly, and impossible for the band to fight. A group of millionaires was furious that college kids weren't willing to pay $18.99 for a physical CD. The philosophical divide that erupted was a massive, unbridgeable canyon. On one side, you had Lars, arguing for the fundamental right of intellectual property. He argued that art is difficult, valuable labor, that artists must be compensated, and crucially, that the creator, not the tech platform, must always retain the power to choose how their work is distributed. On the other side was Napster, the millions of fans, and a brand new generation of tech evangelists. Their argument was powerful. Information wants to be free. They claimed the entire music industry was a predatory, archaic dinosaur, and this new technology was the meteor that was finally going to wipe them out. The public and the media picked a side immediately, and they absolutely did not pick the millionaires. But the most painful blow, the one that Lars says truly stunned him, came from within. While Metallica stood on the front lines, getting brutally eviscerated by the press and the public, the rest of the music industry was hiding in the bunkers. Other artists, terrified of being tarred with the same sellout label, either stayed silent or openly criticized them. Chuck D of Public Enemy championed Napster as a revolutionary tool for artists to bypass the power of the labels. Members of bands like The Offspring and Limp Bizkit publicly distanced themselves from Metallica's hardline stance. Lars felt like an army of one. Lars Ulrich, in an almost hurt tone, said for the record, "The curious thing was the profound uncomfortableness of our peers. That was strange. You'd be looking behind you and there was not a single person behind me. We were the only ones. We were out there, completely by ourselves." He was utterly alone. And then came the final, brutal nail in the PR coffin. South Park. The iconic episode Christian Rock Hard depicted the band as rich, spoiled babies, crying because the illegal downloading meant they could only afford a slightly smaller, gold-plated Shark Tank for their mansion. It cemented the narrative forever. Metallica was a joke. They had turned a complex legal debate about copyright into an ugly, emotional battle against their own fan base. The humiliation was public, but the legal war was fought behind closed doors. And in that arena, the Giants delivered the final, fatal blow that ended the digital freefall. By early 2001, the sheer volume of legal attacks had cornered the young upstart. While the suits from Metallica and Dr. Dre were individual celebrity punches, the true knockout blow came from the massive, ongoing case filed by the Recording Industry Association of America. And the person holding the legal hammer was the brilliant U.S. District Judge, Marilyn Hall Patel. In February 2001, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals delivered a crushing defeat to Napster, upholding the district court's injunction. The core ruling, Napster was enabling mass copyright infringement and had to stop. Judge Patel then issued the order that sealed the company's fate. Napster tried to salvage its operations, pleading with the court that they had developed sophisticated filtering, software that could block an incredible 99.4% of all infringing files identified by the plaintiffs. To a layman, a 99.4% success rate sounds like an absolute triumph of technology, but Judge Patel was not swayed. She demanded 100% compliance, effectively issuing a decree of zero tolerance for the theft of copyrighted music. The technical impossibility of this demand cannot be overstated. Napster was a P2P network. The files lived on millions of user computers. Ensuring that every single user-uploaded file was instantly and perfectly blocked was a non-starter. Facing an impossible order to police the digital Wild West, Napster had no choice. On July 2nd, 2001, the servers went dark. The original, revolutionary, free-for-all Napster was for all intents and purposes dead. It was in this moment of Napster's total collapse that the final chapter of the legal saga with the artist was written. On July 12th, 2001, Metallica and Dr. Dre announced they had reached a settlement with Napster, ending their relentless, year-long campaigns. The terms of the financial settlement were kept private, but the core agreement was not about punitive damages. It was about the future. The settlement required Napster to permanently block all unauthorized music from artists who didn't want their work on the platform. Crucially, both Metallica and Dr. Dre agreed to work with Napster in its future, planned iteration, a legal, paid subscription service that would finally respect copyrights. Lars Ulrich, the man who had famously been the target of so much fan backlash, framed the resolution with a sense of guarded triumph. Our beef hasn't been with the concept of sharing music. The problem we had with Napster was that they never asked us or other artists if we wanted to participate in their business. We believe that this settlement will create the kind of enhanced protection for artists that we've been seeking from Napster. Dr. Dre was even more concise. "I work hard making music. That's how I earn a living. Now that Napster's agreed to respect that, I don't have any beef with them." The artists had won their right to choose, and Napster finally conceded that right. However, the legal and financial damage was too great. The company couldn't execute its business pivot, and in 2002, Napster filed for Chapter 7 liquidation. Metallica and Dr. Dre had, against all odds and against public opinion, struck the final chord in a war that fundamentally changed how we listen to music forever. The smoke had cleared, Napster was dead, Metallica and Dr. Dre had won the legal battle, but, in the eyes of their fans, lost the cultural war. The music industry, terrified and rudderless, spent the next 7 years flailing, trying to figure out how to sell digital files without being sued, relying on clumsy ideas like iTunes' single-song download model. The market was fragmented, piracy persisted, and the consumer was still waiting for the effortless digital jukebox Napster had promised. But in 2008, the true digital phoenix rose from Napster's ashes, Spotify. This service wasn't built on the chaotic, illegal peer-to-peer model. It was built on a subscription-based, centralized, and fully legal streaming model. This was the key innovation. They didn't ask you to buy a file. They asked you to rent access to the entire history of recorded music. And crucially, they had contracts with the major labels, and they paid the artists, the very thing Metallica had been fighting for. This new era completely vindicated Metallica's stance. Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield weren't Luddites trying to stop technology. They were anti-theft advocates fighting for the principle of fair compensation. They didn't hate the digital age. They hated the idea of a corporation building a multi-million-dollar business on their backs without asking or paying. Their fight was simply a legal, economic defense of the principle that if you create something of value, you, the creator, must have the right to control how it is distributed and to be compensated fairly. With the arrival of legitimate streaming platforms, Metallica didn't hesitate. They didn't cling to physical media. They embraced the new distribution model. In 2012, Metallica finally made their entire catalog, including the notorious I Disappear, available on Spotify. This move was the final, definitive proof of their true motivation. Since the Napster saga, the band has continued to produce massive new albums, fully integrating with the digital ecosystem they once battled, releasing Saint Anger, which was released in 2003, Death Magnetic from 2008, Hardwired, to Self-Destruct, both of which came in 2016, and most recently, 2023's 72 Seasons. Metallica's willingness to participate fully in the streaming era, an era where their music is accessed by millions, instantly, globally, demonstrated that their beef was never with the convenience of digital access. They lost the PR war, but they won the fundamental right for all musicians to get paid. Given how Metallica warmed up to the advent of Spotify, it was clear where their intentions with Napster lied. Lars Ulrich commented on it saying, "We said back in 2000, give us a choice, give us a control, give us a way to monetize it. What is Spotify? It's a way to monetize it. So where were we wrong?" And this confirms Lars' stance the whole time. He wasn't against technological advancements. He was just against getting cheated because of it. There you have it, the truth about how Lars Ulrich actually felt about the Napster controversy. Do you think he handled things properly, or was he a monster in the whole ordeal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.